Hi, I'm Stephanie Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Hey Strangelings! I hope you all had a great start to the new year. We are excited for 2024, and we're starting off right with a compilation, so enjoy.
One cold evening, Agatha was walking home along a gravel road covered in snow and surrounded by trees. The moon was shining down, and a lamp gave her just enough light to see the road ahead. It was freezing cold, and she couldn't wait until she could get back to the warmth of her home. It had been a year since her fiancé Eric had gone missing in the war. His father had given up hope, and they came to terms that Eric was dead, and they'd never recover his body like so many other young men lost. On many nights like this one, walking from work to her abode, she felt as if a shadow was behind her, following in a horse-drawn sled. She'd often heard galloping and turned, hoping to see Eric, only to find no one there. She didn't want to give up, but days turned to weeks and weeks into months, and soon enough, it was winter. The war waged on, and she stopped receiving letters. So she moved on. But under the blood moon of this night, a year to the date that she'd said yes to his proposal, something felt different in the air. The galloping seemed to be getting closer, the sled just within view. Was it really him? She remembered their promise in the church graveyard where his mother had been buried. He'd sworn that when he got back, they'd be married and he would take her home. No matter what, he'd come for her. Nothing could stop his love for her, not even death. As she listened to the snow crunching under her feet, she became aware of another sound, a loud shushing and crunching that was getting closer. Soon, a sled came to view behind her. There was a black horse dragging the sled along, and she could see that there was only one person in the sled. When the sled stopped next to her, she realized the driver was her fiancé. Agatha greeted him and climbed up on the sled. She was overjoyed that he had come home. Eric was unusually quiet, but she didn't mind. She was just glad to have him back. For a long time, there was no sound except for the snow crunching under the hooves of the horse and the skids of the sled, until the young man finally broke the silence.
The moon is shining, the dead are riding. Are you not afraid, my love?
He said. When we're together, what do I have to fear? Agatha responded as she hugged him. The moon on his face made his features seem gaunt and skeletal as they passed lanterns. Was it the light playing tricks on her? All was silent once again. She thought the question was odd, and her fiancé was unusually quiet. The dark night was enough to fill anyone with dread, and she figured that he was just scared. Shell-shocked, they called it, from the war. But there was an emptiness in his gaze. He looked only ahead.
Do you remember your promise?
He said. Agatha wondered why he wouldn't turn to her when speaking to her. Eric, is it really you? She asked, getting a little unnerved. All her attempts at conversation were met with no reply besides his strange, trance-like response.
I told you not even death could stop me from coming back to you.
Agatha was starting to get afraid, but she pushed it aside. Where are we going? She asked. The young man did not react to her words, only looking forward at the road ahead. She could only barely see her surroundings in the silver glow of the moon. From beside her, she heard her fiancé muttering,
As am I now, so you will be.
Tired of his cryptic words, Agatha snapped. What do you mean? You can't just show up and not answer my questions or tell me where you've been or where you're taking me. Suddenly, the sled came to a stop. She looked around, trying to figure out her surroundings.
A church, to be married,
he said as her eyes adjusted, realizing where she was. She recognized the place as the town's churchyard, the place they had made their pact. As he walked off, she followed. Her thoughts, however, were interrupted by her realization that his military coat was ripped, seeping red all over his back and dripping blood on the snow. Suddenly, he stopped in front of an open grave and took her hand under the moonlight. She looked down. His fingers were bones.
I have kept my promise. I have come to take you home, my love.
Eric said as he finally turned fully towards her.
And you will keep yours.
The moonlight revealed that half of his face was ripped away, exposing his bloody skull. He stalked towards the dark hole in the ground, gripping her hand tightly. Agata screamed as he pulled her close. It was a kiss of death, his touch ice cold as a shock ran through her system. Her veins froze all throughout her body and face, turning her lips blue as she took her last breath. Carrying his love, the dead man dropped into the grave. In the morning, Agata was found dead. She was buried in the snow in the open pit her fiancé's family had made for Eric's body in the family plot. His father had received his body in confirmation of his death the evening before. He was going to tell Agata the news in the morning, but Eric's body had gone missing overnight. To everyone's shock, they found them together in the snow, their bodies laid to rest. Finally, home. Many years ago, in a village in Japan, there was a young man named Minokichi who owned an inn with his father Masaku. On the way back from a trip one winter day, there was a freak blizzard. Father and son sought refuge in a small hut in the wilderness that hunters used. Finding little firewood, they prepared a modest fire to keep warm through the night. In the middle of the night, Minokichi suddenly awoke to snowflakes falling upon his face. The world was quiet and still. Hearing a sound to his left, he turned and saw the most beautiful woman he had ever seen kneeling next to his father. He watched as her eyes burned with an unnatural wintry fire. She reached out to touch his father, and suddenly he shot awake, gasping and shivering. Minokichi witnessed his father's skin turn a pale blue, and then white as the woman's icy embrace removed any trace of warmth from his body. With a final raspy breath, his father died. It all happened so quickly, and before he could react, the beautiful woman was beside him. Minokichi shivered as he felt her cold breath, just as cold as the snowflakes feathering across his skin.
I am Yuki Onna,
the woman whispered.
I am the Snow Witch. I was going to take your warmth and life as I have your father's, but I will spare you that because you are so handsome. Never speak of this day, or you will meet a fate worse than you could ever imagine. Swear on all you hold dear you will not break your vow.
Looking over at his dead father, Masaku, Minokichi swore to keep her existence a secret. The Snow Witch then turned and disappeared, and with her, the winter storm stopped just as suddenly as it had started. Minokichi returned to his village and his life. His father was mourned as one of the few casualties of winter that year, and life moved on. The seasons changed many times, and finally, the man one day met a beautiful young lady named Oyuki. Her beauty rivaled the Snow Witch that he encountered so long ago in the woods, and he offered her work at his family's inn. Together, they ran the inn and were soon happily married. Eventually, they were joined by 6 children, and Oyuki's beauty never faded as the years went by. On a family trip, Minokichi and Oyuki were caught in a violent snowstorm with their children. Minokichi thought back to the night he lost his father. He had begun to doubt his encounter in the woods, chalking it up to being half awake and too cold. He never did tell anyone, but there was something about this night and his children's eagerness for a story by the fire. Secure within their cabin and too confident in his long years, Minokichi leaned in close and asked his children if they wanted to know about the Snow Witch and what really happened to their grandfather all those years ago. The children quivered in fear as he told the story, but he assured them that they were all very safe here in the cabin together. Asking for their mother, who was preparing supper, the family went into the kitchen to look for Oyuki, but she was nowhere to be found. Returning to the main room, the children began to shiver. The room was icy cold despite the raging fire. Minokichi scanned the room, looking for an open window or door, some source for the sudden cold. His heart sank, and a fear he had not felt in years rushed back into him as his eyes fell on the long-haired woman in the corner, facing away from them. The children cowered behind their father as he shouted, "Who are you? Leave this house at once!"
I told you to not tell a soul,
the figure whispered.
You made a vow.
Oyuki turned to face her family as magic shimmered around her and her earthly beauty gave way to the ethereal beauty of Yuki Onna, the Snow Witch. Speaking to her children, she explained,
Your grandfather gave his warmth and life to quell a blizzard just like this one. Without his sacrifice, many would have died.
She then turned her attention back to Minokichi and sadly said,
You broke your vow. Do you remember what you swore on?
The children's voices had fallen quiet. Minokichi turned to them and cried out as he realized that each of his children had turned into snow versions of themselves, frozen and perfectly shaped in their huddled positions behind him. Minokichi turned back to Yuki Onna, pleading that they be restored to take his warmth instead. Yuki Onna shook her head.
I cannot. Once you broke your vow, you also broke the spell. They are what I am.
At those words, the shutters and doors blew open, pouring the wind and storm into the cabin. After he ran and quickly closed them all, Minokichi discovered the cabin to be empty. His children and his wife, the Snow Witch, nowhere to be found. All he held dear was now gone. The village had much to whisper about Minokichi after that. They say there are many tales about his adventures as he sold his family's inn and began searching for his family among the snowy wilderness. However, he never returned to the village ever again.
Since I was a kid, I've always been a prankster. Not small, momentary gags. I specialized in long, intricate, slow-burning pranks that would drive someone to the brink of madness before finally revealing the lie. Tormenting people was my favorite hobby, which is why my parents sent me to a boot camp for troubled teens. Rigid schedules, strict discipline, intense drills. It was supposed to help me, but it was obvious from the start that the instructors loved tormenting us kids. This place couldn't possibly be sanctioned. We were prisoners. I needed out, so I hatched my greatest prank yet to be free of this place. Breaking into the comms building of this sham of a military boot camp was easy. Turning on the PA system, even easier. Using my most inhumane voice, spewing guttural sounds from my throat, I thundered,
I will rip you all apart.
From the comms window, I saw confused kids stopping their torturous drills. The head drill instructor spun around in surprise and tripped on his face. My laughter boomed out of the speakers. The furious look on his face was priceless.
Come and get me.
I baited. My discipline was swift and harsh. I'll just say that the nicest part of it was having to sprint obstacle courses all throughout the night. While I was out there, on the far end of the obstacle course, away from the instructor minding me, I heard something. An inhuman screech that sliced through the air. It sounded like the perfect mimic of the noises I made earlier. At the tree line, I saw it. A blank-faced creature with sharp claws and an open mouth, a smirk twitching its face. In the blink of an eye, it was right in front of me, towering over me, teeth gleaming, drool dripping onto my face, hunching over, limbs bent at odd angles. It reached out, held my face as it spoke to me.
I've been watching you. I'll help you because you'll help me.
Nodding in agreement slowly. Afraid for my life, I didn't know what it meant, but I'd give it anything to go away. Then it started changing. It shrank, body parts shifting into a human form. When it was finally done, it was as if I was staring in a mirror. It looked exactly like me. It mimicked my voice perfectly. I'll help you get what we both want. Striding back into the forest, wearing my face, it disappeared into the trees. The instructor ran up to me then, blaming me for the screeching noise, and doubled my punishment. All the next day, I was in my bunk, recovering from yesterday's torment. Weirdly enough, though, the day after that, kids were looking at me distrustfully. A series of deadly pranks were happening around the boot camp. A collapsing obstacle course, snapped ropes, and so on and so on. And every day, somehow, my screech would sound over the PA system. I wasn't doing it, but nobody believed me. Would you? I barely believed me. And it kept happening, day after day. That screech would echo, the pranks would happen, and I would be punished all over again. My life was becoming a living nightmare. I was being punished, ridiculed. No one trusted me. It was the mimic, though, and I had to escape. I waited until the next time I heard that screech. This time, it was during lights out. I grabbed a hatchet and snuck out of the boot camp. My flashlight scanned the dark forest as I ran, light flitting across the trees, and suddenly spotlighted my own face staring back at me. It was the mimic. It raced towards me, and everything went black. When I woke up, the sun was shining. I was still in the woods, and I was alone. There was no sign of the shapeshifter. But there was the sound of a building collapsing and people screaming. In the sky, I could see great clouds of smoke. I stumbled through the woods to get back, but the boot camp for troubled teens was already gone. Crumbling, exploding, ablaze. Nothing was spared. As I ran through the gates, wounded instructors hid behind their hands, and kids fled away from me for their lives, growing more terrified when they saw my face. "Please don't eat us," they begged. "Monster," they cried. I was too stunned to speak. It wasn't me. It was the thing that had used my face. "I'll help you get what we both want," it had said. It felt like I was the mark in one of my own pranks. The shapeshifter burst out of the wreckage, but this time, as it rose from the rumble, a hulking, bloody menagerie of different body parts, all mimicked from its devoured victims. Licking its chops, it said, "I'd been starving for so long, and now we're both free." Striding past me, it vanished into the woods, leaving me behind in the wreckage that it had left.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.